Hi, welcome to Maverick Mindcast. My guest today is Jaymie Icke. He's the CEO of Ickonic, an alternative streaming platform. Jaymie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Great to have you. I wanted to know, how did you come up with the inspiration for Ickonic? Like, what was your inspiration behind starting Ickonic? Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I wouldn't say I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was younger, I was in sport. I played football, soccer to a pretty high level. I was at Manchester United when I was 16 years old, and a lot of players I played with have gone on to have careers, some of which have played for England. So I thought that was where my future was. But if I'm being honest, I always felt I had the ability physically, but it never quite felt right mentally. I didn't really fit into that world. Football, I mean, I still love watching it, but it's very it's a world that I never really felt like I fit into, in dressing rooms and things like that. I always felt like an odd one out. So I felt like I was always here to do something interesting. I didn't really know what. And then in my late teens, early 20s, I started working with my dad as a production manager, organizing all of his events around the world. And I got to travel quite a bit and met some amazing people and saw some lovely places, and also learned a lot about how certain things work. And the events industry, is the skills and knowledge that you gain from that is very applicable to any area of business, really. In fact, it's actually a really good learning curve doing events, because it's such a time sensitive thing. If there's a problem, generally you have maybe 5 minutes to fix something, or you're going to have an audience of people that are not happy. Very, very rarely in other areas of business are things that pressure time sensitive. So it taught me to remain calm when things go wrong, and to always think critically rather than panic. So I always felt like those skills that I picked up from doing that could be used to do something. And then as social media censorship and mainstream media censorship became even more obvious, if you like, through 2010, 2011 onwards, I felt that there was a need to start something to counterbalance that. And in 2019, I came up with a concept to start Ickonic. We launched in November, and then 3 months later, the world changed forever. And in some ways, that was good for the information, because it meant more people were starting to question it. More people were sat at home with time to look and research and question what was going on. And I think many people that have been around the alternative media and in the alternative media for a number of years, what's always been the problem when events have happened, take 9/11, for example, the war on terror, things like that are very easy to expose that the mainstream story isn't true. It hasn't affected everybody. Whereas this pandemic or plandemic, whatever you want to call it, the last 2 years has affected everyone. It's affected people that are, white, black, rich, poor, men, women, any country in the world. You've experienced some kind of restriction on your life through no fault of your own. So it's forced people to kind of focus the mind and look a lot more at alternative information. So that was the inspiration behind Ickonic, really. It was an idea to get an alternative channel out there with no censorship, to broadcast information that you're not hearing about anywhere else, and to have a channel that is set up to inspire and to empower rather than belittle and make people feel small and insignificant, which is what I think we can all agree the mainstream media does. You never watch a show on CNN and feel powerful and inspired afterwards. You generally feel fearful and very, very little. So I think there needed to be something to counterbalance that. It's telling you what's going on in the world, but then giving you information what to go and do about that. If we're talking about, toxic diet, for example, and the fact people are getting sicker, well, here's some information of how you can make decisions and changes to your life to counterbalance that and take control of your own life. So that's the main inspiration behind Ickonic, really. It's trying to create a future that we actually want to live in.
Yeah. And actually, it kind of touched on it, but I'm going to ask anyway. Has your vision changed from 2019 to 2020? I mean, because now you're adding a lot of new shows. Do you think those shows would have still been there had March 2020 not hit, or would it have been more focused on entertainment? Because you have news now and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone a lot more into news and current affairs than we probably expected to. And I think you're right. A lot of the reason for that has been the state of the world. People need information now. They need context to what's going on. So that's probably why we've added 2 more shows in that category that we probably weren't going to 9 months ago, 12 months ago. I mean, the passionate area for me is health. I love health and nutrition, and information that can help people change their perceptions, whether it be their view of themselves, their view of the world, and make positive changes within their own lives, rather than looking to some kind of guru to tell them what to do. That's the area that I'm most passionate about, and the nature of reality and what we're all doing here, and what is this? Is there something more? There has to be something more, right? Those big questions, that's what's always fascinated me. So a lot of the content that we make, the longer form stuff, the films and the series, we focus on those areas because the answers to everything, in my opinion, lies in those areas, because they're the main questions that we don't know the answers to. What are we doing here at this time? And I think, my attitude towards that is, if we know that information, then how many people would live their lives completely differently? So I think, if you know that this isn't it, that there's eternal life, that your consciousness carries on forever, would you live your life as fearfully? Would you be too, scared and passive to take risks and to take chances? You probably wouldn't. I think a lot of the reason people live like that is because they don't know what's next. And there's that fear that this is it, so I better not mess it up. So I've always been fascinated in those areas. And I think we probably would have gone into those areas more than we have done had the pandemic not happened. Although, those areas are really important now because people are living very feared lives at the moment. We've gone from one catastrophe to another one starting this week. That's another reason for people to be terrified, whether you live in Europe and you're thinking about this is going to break out on your doorstep, or whether you're in America thinking about how your energy prices are going to go up, whatever it might be. It's another thing to keep people scared. So I think content that is put out there that balances that out, that makes people feel, actually, you know what, the world is not on the outside of me dictating to me. I can make decisions and I can change my life for myself. I don't just need to listen and wait for somebody to tell me what to do, which is how the mainstream machine, if you like, portrays the world.
Yeah. And I think some people don't even ask those questions, like, why am I here? What truly am I? So even just getting those kinds of things presented and kind of applying them to yourself is, for some people, is a first time thing, no matter how old they are.
Yeah,
I know
I
for
totally
myself
agree.
too. I mean, I've thought, but not to the depth and breadth with everything going on now. I think it's really provoked that level of thinking, that kind of like not just surviving head above water, being caught in that cycle with the carrot and the stick, and thinking just to get to the next step day to day, just keeping a head above water. So that's definitely appreciated. I'm just, for people out there who are listening, who may want to start an alternative, be an entrepreneur, but start an alternative business that kind of goes against the mainstream. I'm curious to know, how did you, I mean, you obviously don't have to go into painstaking detail, but how did you get Ickonic started? I mean, you have an idea. It's one thing that a lot of people have ideas. It's another thing to actually bring it to life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite fortunate with a lot of synchronicity of meeting the right people at the right time. In 2018, it would have been the summer of 2018, I was fortunate enough to meet an English entrepreneur who is quite a wealthy guy and very successful in starting businesses. And I just spoke to him a little bit about my idea. And he said something to me which really stuck with me, which is, don't go too crazy on a business plan that you tweak for the next 5 years and it sits on a shelf, because the only business plans that look like the originals are the ones that have never even been attempted. They're just sat there because people are too scared to fail, so they're too scared to try. Just start it, you'll learn, you'll make mistakes, and you'll be a better entrepreneur as a result. And I remember thinking, okay, well, let's give it a go then. So we started sort of late 2018, just me and my brother doing a little podcast together, just me and him chatting to anyone that we fancy talking to, from sports stars to writers to poets, lots of different people, not any sort of specific subjects, just a general conversation. And it kind of evolved from there. And then, November 2019, we launched the channel. And in the lead up to that, I met an amazing guy in August called Richard Willett, who still works here now, who's one of our senior filmmakers. I'm then, not long after launching, it was just me, him, and a girl called Gina, who's still here and is my sort of number two. We went to New Zealand to film. We met Christiana Van White. She's here now. She's moved to the UK. She lives near me and she works here every day. And she's another one of our senior filmmakers. And it was a lot of synchronicity like that. We met the right people at the right time. and it's been able to grow quite organically. And we've built, as you'd expect with a company like this, with the philosophy that we have, we've built a real army, if you like, of people that are all very supportive of each other. We've got a really great team environment. We've got about 20 members of staff here in our UK office now, 2 in America. So it's just been a real kind of synchronistic journey, if you like. And I always think when things are like that, they're meant to be.
Yeah. What do you attribute your success to?
I think, well, I've learned so much over the years from my dad about, the information and the alternative media that we're in. And one of the biggest things I've learned from him is that never say die attitude, that kind of don't accept just because something might appear impossible or something might appear like it's not going to work. Don't accept that, never give up. And I think, one of the worst things you could ever say to me is that something can't be done, because I just see that as a challenge. And I think when we started Ickonic, it seemed a massive challenge. It still does. You compare what we've got to what CNN have got. They've got more money, they've got more reach, they've got more resources, they've got everything more. But I don't see them as a threat. I see that as a challenge, that we need to be better than in order to have the same kind of level of stuff as they are. And I really do believe that we're on the right track to doing that. And I attribute success to just being passionate and being relentless, and not refusing to give up when things get tough. We've had some tough moments. When we first launched the channel, we used to save money so that we could have the network up. We had Vimeo host the videos through private links, and then from nowhere overnight they deleted everything, and we had to start again. But we were in the process of putting together our own player system anyway. That was always the plan, because we knew they'd do that at some point. I didn't expect them to do it that night. So that was 2 weeks of, relentlessly re-uploading. Obviously we had stuff backed up, but it was 2 weeks of relentlessly re-uploading stuff. So that was quite tough. That was, March, April 2020. So there's been challenges along the way. But I think, anyone that's successful in whatever area of life they're successful in, you generally have to face challenges, and it's how you deal with them. That is how you show whether you're going to be a success or not.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about compromise? Because, for instance, I am a subscriber, obviously. And I'll go, I know certain shows are coming on certain days. And sometimes I'm like, oh, in my car, I'll just go to the app, the Apple app. And
yeah.
And I'm like, why isn't it coming up in the search? Why isn't it coming up in the search? Probably because you're not allowed to put that on there. So can you just talk a little bit how you've had to compromise a bit with mainstream to kind of get your content out there, and how you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, the only platform that we have to do that with is the Apple Store, the App Store, the Google Play Store, and the Roku Store, which we have the other 2 apps available. We don't have that issue. So we launched the apps on the 9th of April last year, and we put both through to be submitted. Google Android one was accepted straight away. The Apple one, they kept coming back with rejections without really giving any details as to why. And then eventually, after about 2-3 months of back and forth, they told us why. So we made the kind of decision that it was better to have the majority of the content out there than have none of it on the App Store. So I'm sure that our days are numbered on all those platforms at some point, and they will do a sort of Alex Jones to us, and they'll take us off of everything. But for now, it feels like it's an opportunity to reach people that you're not going to if you're not on those platforms, because to people that are seeing this information for the first time, one of the big things that I was really passionate about us doing is putting it in a kind of package that people are used to. You subscribe to a streaming platform, you expect to be able to watch it on your television, you expect to be able to have an app, you expect to be able to have a streaming stick. If all of a sudden all you can do is watch it on the computer, you're limiting yourself, I think, a lot. So I think that word's quite right, compromise. It was a compromise to try and ensure that we still manage to reach those users. And I think if you subscribe to Ickonic and you have an iPhone and you go on there and you can't watch certain shows, but you can on your computer or your laptop, you're probably going to do that.
Yep. Or so your browser. which I do.
Yeah, or your browser. Yeah, exactly.
I just want to talk about the business side so people understand that
Yeah.
sometimes you have to compromise and you have to, give
Yeah,
a
it's
little
it's
to
it's
get.
yeah, it's just picking your battles. It's,
Yeah.
some fights you're going to win, some fights you have to settle for a draw. And I think that's kind of a bit of a draw for us. They don't want us on the App Store, but they can't really justify not having us at this point. We obviously want all of our content on there. We know if we do that, they won't have us at all. So it's kind of like a give and throw story.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question is, it kind of brings me, as we're talking on that lines, is about kind of being aware of when you're plateauing. So, you're obviously, it's a subscription based platform, and obviously, like people like me, I'm sold 100%. So I'm on there. I'm sold on everything. I was sold before I joined, but now thinking beyond the people who are already kind of in that mindset, already very receptive and ready, willing, and able to consume that content because they're on board. Have you felt like there's been a period of plateauing and then saying, well, how can we get people who may not know this is the kind of content they want? And maybe that ties into the Apple, store apps and things like that, but just curious how you're tackling that.
Yeah, well, that's always the challenge. How do you reach people that are not, you're not reaching already? And I think one thing that I'm really keen to do is to not just preach to the converted. You want to reach people that have maybe not seen this information before, maybe dismiss it, maybe think you're crazy, but you want to put it in front of them and challenge their perceptions. What's the best way to do that? Obviously, social media is a really good way to do that. It's very difficult when you're shadow banned and blocked from running ads and various other things. That is tough. So word of mouth is a massive way that we've managed to grow so far. We've also, had to work with affiliates, which we're doing at the moment, of ways to try and put our information and our videos in front of people that wouldn't necessarily see them. And it's a challenge. That's the constant challenge. But we're very ambitious. We don't just want to settle for where we are now. I said when we launched Ickonic that I wouldn't consider us anywhere near a success until we had 1 million subscribers. And we're a fair way away from that. So, there's a long way to go. And I think there's a platform I'm sure called Gaia, who they obviously, we've probably got a little crossover in terms of the content genres that we cover. We go into areas they don't, and they go into areas we don't, but there's probably a little crossover. And they've got about 800,000 subscribers, I believe. So the opportunity is definitely there. The interest is definitely there. It's just a case of ensuring that you get your message right, you get your content right, you get the product right. So things like we were saying, the apps and accessibility for people to be able to see it in ways they want to. It's a case of getting that right. And that's what our challenge is over the next, ongoing really.
Yeah. How do you measure success? And that could be in any way, personally, monetarily. How do you measure success for yourself?
For me, I think success is a feeling. I don't think it can be quantified by any specific measurement because, there's billionaires in the world that are very miserable. There's people with nothing that are really happy. So I think it's a feeling that means something different to every person. So for me, success in my life would be leaving the planet in a better state than I've left it, than I arrived, and knowing that my children, who are really, really young at the moment, are going to grow up in a world of of freedom and of opportunity, rather than the world that the elite want us to live in. I mean, I dread to think what that's going to be like in 20 years unless we do something about it. So that would be success for me. I get into work really early. Like this morning, I have to leave the house unfortunately before one of my kids was awake, so I didn't get to say hello. But I'll make sure I'm home to put them to bed, and I'll make sure I'm there on weekends. I do my best to not work at all on the weekends, so I'm there with my family, because that for me is success. It's being around the people that you care about. It's having people that care about you, and it's a feeling within inside, I think. So I don't sort of define it via money or status or any materialistic possessions. I think it's a feeling. So it's very difficult to describe.
Yeah, it's personal to everyone, that feeling. Where do you see the future of alternative, for lack of a better word, entrepreneurship going? Like an entrepreneur like yourself, who's kind of going against the mainstream. And actually, that was my question. And then you interjected something else. Do you see, and that makes me want to expand upon that question. Do you see it going into a more ethical, more authentic direction, or it going more toward staying on the same course of just being a little bit more quantitatively minded and just, whatever will appeal to the people is what we'll do? Do you feel like, because it seems like we're going through an awakening, do you feel like that'll translate into entrepreneurship as well?
Yeah, I do. I think, the mainstream are going to fight very hard to try and suppress alternatives. I think, there's a bill going through Parliament here in this country called the Online Harms Bill, which is designed to do nothing except censor the alternative media under the kind of pretext of it causes harm. So there's definitely going to be challenges like that they're going to try and make it more difficult to be an alternative entrepreneur or run an alternative business, particularly a media business. We've seen it in the last couple of years with the way Parler were treated by Amazon, where they just try and censor and take these platforms down. So there's definitely going to be more challenges like that, I think. But I definitely think we're going to move to a more ethical way of practicing, a more human scale level of business. And these giant transnational corporations that effectively run the world, that we live in today, they're not relatable to anyone. That it's not human scale. I think getting back to that kind of, I've got something you need, you've got something I need, let's work together. I think we definitely need to get more back, back to that. And, an area of that I'm very passionate about is food. Always buy off local farmers and local greengrocers and stuff like that, because you're buying stuff that's local to you. That money's going into the area around you, and that local economy is benefiting from people doing that. I appreciate, the way that the financial markets are. It's not always possible to buy local because it's so expensive, but that kind of principle, I think, is a great way for us to aspire to, for it to be a more ethical way of doing business. I think more and more people are starting to see through the vacuous nature of, mainstream media advertising campaigns that are clearly designed to make you feel inferior so that you want to buy a certain product, whatever that product might be. So I definitely think as this awakening goes on, there's going to be more people seeing through the false nature of mainstream ways of business practices, and people are going to want a more ethical, a more local, human scale way of conducting business with each other, and I think that's only a good thing.
Awesome. Now, what would your advice be to an entrepreneur who maybe didn't have, and I'm not saying you had a ton of resources, but you just by chance, serendipitously, your life experience, I mean, having David Icke as your dad and then being put in a position to plan, a lot of his events and things like that. Somebody could be saying, well, I never had that experience, but I really want to do that. Does that mean I can't do it? I mean, obviously they can, but just curious to know what your advice would be. I mean, I know, and I don't mean that in any way to say, of course, you worked super hard, but just if they feel like, I'm starting from scratch, I don't know anybody, what can I do? What would your advice be to someone like that?
Well, I think the advice would be the same principle is, don't accept no for an answer. If you believe in your ideas and you believe in yourself, then just go for it. And invariably, if you're passionate and you work hard on something that you're good at, it's going to go somewhere. You look at so many people. I mean, the easiest way to measure success in business, right, is money. And you see so many people that are really wealthy that have built these massive businesses or massive successful empires that came from nothing, came from absolutely nothing. And I think that should be a massive inspiration to many, that it's possible. It's absolutely possible. You just need to, as I say, don't accept no for an answer. And if it's not going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be easy. Even people that start life with massive resources and a small loan of $1 million, as Donald Trump did, it's still hard. It's still hard. So I think that would just be my advice, and that's advice that can be applicable for any area of life, really. If you're passionate about something, then go for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess the context behind that question is just because you're seeing now such an attack on small businesses. You're seeing such an attack on anti-establishment. Any, if you're not some corporatocracy or whatever, you're not really, they're kind of trying to come after you. And I feel like that's just going on globally. So it's kind of a strange time to be thinking of embarking on, not saying that it's obviously always a good time, but it's a time of a lot of uncertainty. It's a time of clear open hostility towards small business owners.
Yeah, well, that absolutely.
So.
They don't want that. They don't want people that are in control of their own destiny, if you like. They're in control of their own income, their own ability to feed their families. They want people reliant on either the system or these large corporations. And one area you mentioned there about the attacks on small businesses, one of the big ones that's been hugely affected by this last 2 years is the hospitality industry. Massively, particularly here in the UK, where the lockdowns have just closed literally everything. And I look at it this way: if people work together, then the opportunity to overturn those policies is really easy. So take like the little village that I live in has got 3 pubs, right? So if all 3 of those pubs decided to stay open during the lockdown, what would the police do? Okay, they might turn up and shut down the pubs. But if the 3 in the next village and the 3 in that village, 3 in that village all do the same, all of a sudden there's 15 pubs open. What are they going to do if every village and town does the same thing? And if all of those different businesses support each other and say, you know what, if the police turn up at your place, we'll send everyone up to you to support you, and vice versa, they just wouldn't be able to contain the numbers. You'd overwhelm the police within a few hours, and you'd stop that policy. So that's a big thing that I'd say to small businesses, is ways that you can support and work together. That's massive, absolutely massive, because an attack on one of you is an attack of all of you, really.
Yeah. And it just seems like there's so much fear permeating, it's like that seems to be the core of how all of this is able to accelerate at the pace in which it has over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I
you
completely
can contain
agree.
that fear, you can contain the masses. And so, yeah, we're seeing it. I live in Florida, and we have organizations where they say that, like, hey, if they turn off your electricity, we'll bring the generator, we'll bring water, and this is a restaurant, that would host us. And, you really have to have those like support systems in place.
Yeah, I completely agree. Florida seems to be the only sensible state in America through all of this. Texas maybe a little bit, but
We got to get Ickonic out Florida. Come on, Jaymie.
that's the plan.
Sunny Florida. It's awesome there.
That's possibly the plan.
Good.
We'll see.
Glad to hear it, because it's a great, and our governor's very good to entrepreneurs, and to, he definitely wants the state to grow. So I'm very proud. I was a California refugee myself. I'm not originally from there, but I did travel. So
yeah, the lady that's the head of our American operation, she's the same. She's from Philadelphia, but she was in LA for years, in Hollywood, and left for the same reason. So now she's back in Philadelphia, waiting for me to kind of work out where we want to set up shop in America, and she'll relocate. But Florida is one of the options.
Yeah, I mean, everything's going to come when it needs to come. And, I truly believe in that, maybe things aren't happening the way they need to. And then all of a sudden they'll just accelerate if you just stay on track and stay patient.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Well, is there anything else? I mean, we've covered a lot, and I really want to thank you so much for taking this time and sharing so much of your story and your knowledge. Is there anything else you wanted to tell the audience?
I don't know. I don't do interviews that often, so I don't really. It's more experience every time I do one.
Okay. And what's coming up for Ickonic? I mean, I feel like you guys have so many new shows, so much more content. It's very exciting as a subscriber. I have to say, I'm loving everything you're pushing out there.
Thank you very much.
So maybe we could talk about that a little bit, just to
absolutely
understand what's on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just launched a new flagship weekly show a few weeks ago now, called Divine, which is, as far as I'm aware, the first alternative media female-led show, which is bizarre, really, given the majority of the protests and resistance movements that I've ever seen. It's been predominantly women involved. So that's launched with 2 really cool people, Leanne Brown and Lilani Dowding, a few weeks ago. So that's going really well. It's a very different style of news and current affairs show. It's a lot more magazine style, laid back. So we've had some really interesting guests on there. So that launched mid-January. So that's great. We're working at the moment on a really cool series in Brooklyn, New York, which we start shooting on the 8th of March, which is going to come out in May. So we've got tons of content. We got a new series out. It came out yesterday, actually, on the history of tarot and how
I
that
saw
can.
that. I
Yeah,
liked
so
it.
that's an interesting one. We've got an original film coming out at the end of March called Heaven's Messenger, which is all about mediumship. And it's the life story of one particular medium in the south of England. It's a fascinating story. We're launching a new section to the channel in August called Thrive, which is going to be all about health and wellness. So there's going to be content on there from, you know, movement, fitness, yoga, meditation, nutrition, diet plans, mental health, detoxing. So we're going to announce that in July, and that's going to be a whole kind of separate sub brand of its own. So there's tons of stuff going out, tons of stuff. I'm working on a new film, which I started a few weeks ago, which is coming out in July, which has got some quite big names in it, like Peter McCulloch and Robert Malone, some people, and various others, Tom Cowan, Andrew Kaufman. So that's coming out on the 2nd of July. So that's going to be our big summer release. We're planning a big premiere in London for that in July. So it very much feels like we're at the start of a real kind of start of the wave, if you like, of 2022 that we're hoping to really grow this year.
Yeah, I'd actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying we've got plans to set up shop in America. As I mentioned, we've got 2 people full time already, and the plan is to have a studio over there by the end of this year, start of next year, and have a flagship American weekly news and current affairs show as well. So yeah, it's there's a lot going on.
Gonna give InfoWars a run for their money, huh?
Well, I think we'll work in partnership. We'll work in partnership. I've got a lot of time for Alex. I think he's a very tenacious guy, and what he's been done for the alternative media is very good. So I'd happily work in partnership.
I know, I'm just joking. And what about I heard something about doing something with your dad, kind of a little different than Renegade, but something else.
Yeah, that's being worked on as well. Yeah, like a life story, a much more personal, behind the scenes, like a visual autobiography kind of style. That's being worked on at the moment, actually. First interviews for that are next week. So we haven't got a release plan for that yet. I think that's probably likely to be around the fall of this year, maybe the winter of this year. So yeah, because he's 70 in a few weeks, 70 on the 29th of April. So it seems like a nice round number to look back at what's gone before.
Awesome. Well, yep, he certainly contributed a lot to my awakening. So very grateful for him and for you and your family.
Thank you.
Everything you're bringing to the table, because it's definitely needed. We're kind of, I feel anyway for myself, we're like starving for this kind of content, something more positive, something more inspirational. And I think inspiration to me is the big word that stands out, you know.
Yeah, people have had enough of feeling terrified. They've had enough of turning on the TV and it telling them to be scared of something new than they were told to be scared of yesterday. You know, they've had enough of it. And I think that's why they've probably changed their tactics slightly, and they've gone from COVID to now, you know, another Cold War. They've changed the narrative to try and keep it fresh and keep people in that fear mindset. But I think people are seeing through it. I really do. I really do. And that's only going to be, I think that's only going to grow. When you're offering no hope to people, which the mainstream media doesn't, eventually people are going to turn their back. And I think that's what, you know, we're here to do, is offer that hope and that inspiration, as you say, that you don't need someone to tell you how to live your life. You're in control of it. You can take control of your own life any second you decide to.
Yeah. And stop looking at ourselves as little me. And even if you do see yourself as that, I mean, geez, if you have children, you know, which I know you do, you want more for them. You always want more for your children than you do for yourself. So,
oh yeah, 100%. That's
really hoping that'll be the impetus for people to wake up, you know, not for yourself, for your kids, because we know now that it's definitely being more directed
100%
at children. And because, you know, getting them at a young age and kind of just wiping out any memory of anything beyond technology and, you know, compliance and things like that. So
you would hope so. You'd hope that children would be the line for people.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I know exactly what you mean. Well, Jaymie, thank you so much. Where can people find you? I know you're more low key, so maybe if you just want to put out the Ickonic stuff. But
yeah, so I mean, I'm not a social media person myself, so I don't really got many pages of my own. But if you want to learn about Ickonic, yeah, it's obviously www.ickonic.com. ICKONIC, iconic.com. There's tons and tons of content on there across a really range of subjects that are there to inform you what's going on in the world and what to do about it.
And there's a free trial, right? So
There
you
is
don't have
7
to
days.
just buy it right away. You can do a 7-day
Yep.
trial.
There's a 7-day free trial. Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many live talks with your dad I squeezed into that.
Well, yeah, there's the whole archive of his stuff going back to 1994. So he looked a lot younger then. The stress is taking its toll.
Of course. Yeah, he's been through a lot. But yeah, I remember because it was The Answer. I signed up for that, and then I think it was like a 14-day trial, that one. And
yeah, you would have done that.
It was quite a learning curve. It was cool. And then I, of course, subscribed. But all right, great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaymie. If you want to hang on for a second once I stop, but I would love having you. Would love to have you again in a while to just get an update on what Ickonic is up to. Thank you.
Sounds great. Well, hopefully I'll be over in Florida in the summer. We could maybe do it face to face.
That would be wonderful. I'd love that. Thank you, Jaymie.